Hello and welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang Desai. Simon and I are off this week, but we decided we wanted to look back at one of Dominic Thiem's greatest moments, his biggest moment, arguably winning the US Open back in 2000 as he finally called it a career this week with his last match at home in Austria. Obviously a sad time seeing Dominic's career cut short, but he gave us so much joy on the court, and I think it's fitting that with Defector staff writer Giri Nathan, we look back at this excellent performance from Thiem in what was a super weird tournament. Let us remember that Dominic prevented us from having Alexander Zverev be a Grand Slam champion, so we owe him a lot of thanks. We also talk about Naomi Osaka's dominance at that US Open, so we hope you enjoyed this look back at Thiem's time back at the US Open in 2020. We'll talk to you soon.
Hello and welcome to the Open Era Podcast. My name is Devang Desai and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushell. Bush, the US Open is finito, done. The US Open final, men's side, done. How do you feel, sir?
Oh, God. Emotionally, physically spent. You know, my girlfriend made a really funny point at the end of it, and she said, you know how some men put on sympathy weight when their girlfriends are pregnant? I kind of feel like I'm getting sympathy cramps just sitting and watching the back end of that match. Good Lord. I feel for both of them. That was a rough experience to spend 4 hours, though, so I'm looking forward to unpacking it with two people who have also been through the same experience with me. We're
not alone this week. Simon's right. Friend of the show, Defector staff writer Giri Nathan is with us. Giri, sir, how are you, man? I sensed some uneasiness in your voice as we started talking, and I feel your pain.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad we scheduled this pod for when we did, because I think group therapy is the only way out of the situation we all find ourselves in. So let's get together.
So it's not a funeral. Dominic Thiem is a Grand Slam champion finally after coming close many times before. He defeats Alexander Zverev in a 5-set classic. No, I think you could just say it went 5 sets. I think that's more fair. Alexander Zverev started off extremely well, playing more aggressive perhaps than he had all tournament. Much to the happiness, I think, of the viewing public, because Zverev, when he's really going for it, is pretty fun to watch. But on the other side, Dominic Thiem offered nothing. And then it kind of flip-flopped, and we ended up in a 5th set that I think we could have predicted coming back in the 3rd. And Dominic Thiem almost cramped out at the very end and didn't survive physically. But Bush, I guess, the headline is Dominic Thiem is a Grand Slam champion, but I think the way it happened, somehow it went to script, even though it went a bit off the rails a bit.
I mean, that's one way of looking at it, right? I think Zverev came out looking like what we expected him to look like all of his career, right? There was an expectation that this tall, athletic, very strong kid with all the strokes, with an amazing, big, powerful serve, was going to fully live up to that expectation and win in straight sets. And it certainly looked like that through the first 45 minutes. Basically up until the point that Thiem put any kind of pressure on him. He looked pretty good up until the point that he had a double break, couldn't close it out in the 2nd set. And basically from that point onwards, it was a lot of nerves. And I think that's really just the thing that has separated him from being a Grand Slam champion. And that is still true here. It's just mentally, he really, really struggled to see this one out. His body didn't hold up well at the end there. But of course, everyone's going to talk about the second serve. Everyone's going to talk about the serve that's there. But I think just before we just fully bury both of these individuals, Thiem's a Grand Slam champion. Massive applause to him and his team. And also Zverev, if you want to take positives away, for the first 40 minutes, he looked like the best player in the world. And that is something that we're going to forget in all of this, and everyone's going to laugh and point fingers and everything. But there is a champion in there. There is a slam champion, but this is badly going to affect him mentally. And the scars of this one might take a very long time to heal.
Yeah, I think that's right. It was there were flashes from each player that kind of justified their position in this final, the fact that they even got here. And I think Thiem, the cumulative work he's put in at the slams more than justifies him finally getting this one. And I'm definitely happy for him. But yeah, it was just a rough watch because the level that Zverev did flash in the first, let's say, 2 sets, and well, he was up a break in the third too, right? So basically, up to that point, he'd kind of almost sustained that best player in the world type level. But physically and mentally, the match took a very strange twist soon thereafter.
So I think if you consider the way Dominic Thiem got to the final, like you mentioned, Giri, like he dismantled Felix, he dismantled De Minaur, he took care of a Daniil Medvedev, who I thought was playing the best tennis coming into that semifinal, and through that, like you said, totally full value. I think the way Zverev got to the final was maddening other people watching him to a disturbing extent, where he makes it past Davidovich Fokina in the 4th round, but from then on, it's very unconvincing. He beats Borna Coric in just a widely hated match from beginning to end. He goes down 2 sets early to PCB, rights the ship there. PCB's back basically goes as well, but I think the whole tournament for Alexander Zverev was just about surviving, and we finally saw him play like he was the best player on the court, or play as if he was supposed to win when really no one thought he was going to coming into this match. I think Dominic Thiem was the better choice, and for good reason, but Zverev, without that weight, played so well that eventually I feared it was going to come back to him where, okay, now eventually expectation will fall on you. It was on him. He served for the match. Bush, you talked about, will he get over this? I think he might, and I think just based on the quality overall without the big 3 around, I think you saw what could end up happening towards the end of his slam. But I guess, Simon, what was your, beyond Dominic Thiem maybe, what was the biggest revelation, I guess, without the other 3 guys around? Because I felt like this was a bit of a referendum on that as well.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And I think I mentioned on the podcast last week that in the absence of the big 3 and in a post-big 3 world, the men who were supposed to get to the final of this tournament did, and they got to the latter stages of it without Tsitsipas, the 4th seed, getting really to the business end of it. And really, that's the reality of it, is that we've been blessed for a very long time with 3 men at the very highest level who, going into slam finals, you're basically going to get high levels of tennis, exceptional hitting and quality, and a standard and level which is really high. The same cannot be said previous to them. We have had some very good finals as well, but we've also had a lot of clunkers, and I think this one firmly sits into that category. I think one of the best ways I can describe this to everyone is if you had said that this was the junior US Open final, then I think that would be a lot closer to reality in terms of the swings and the momentum breaks and all those sort of things that happen, because it really looked like 2 players who were very, very nervous, who didn't want to go for their shots, flashes of amazing brilliance and genius, but at the end, there was a lot of pushing around and a lot of body breakdowns as well. So if you've ever dived into the depths of watching junior Grand Slam tennis, it kind of looks like this. And it's dramatic. There are swings of momentum left and right. If that's for you, then great. But it wasn't the highest standard I've ever seen.
Giri, I think I saw ESPN said their TV ratings are down. They didn't say it, but it was a report. I guess they wouldn't come out and be like, yeah, our ratings are super bad. But I saw a report this week about that. I think overall, maybe the first week and maybe the Cincinnati tournaments as well, I was a bit taken aback by tennis with no fans, even though we've seen all of the other sports do it. But maybe the same question to you, the big 3 not being around after Novak defaulted, did it feel different? I think a lot of the matches that we watched from that Sunday onward had that specter of like, oh my God, anyone can win it. And each player slowly kind of realizing that in real time, which I think that made it fun for me.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, which is that it's probably divides along neatly between like the casual serious tennis head divide. Whereas like if you're tuning into the second week of a slam to watch a guy kick ass for 3 matches, you're definitely not going to get your money's worth this time around. But if you are someone who's been keeping up closely with the tour month to month and has been kind of waiting this interminable wait just to see if anyone under the age of like 47 can win a major. There's a lot of excitement in this week, and it's like I was thinking on maybe Monday that, hey, on Sunday I'm actually gonna have a new major champion to write about, which is just interesting for narrative reasons. It turns out that the reality of many of those matches was not all that pleasant to watch. As you pointed out, the Sasha versus PCV, Sasha versus Chorich. I liked your term, widely hated matches. Definitely in survival mode, getting through it, but not shocked that it's been a tough week ratings-wise for ESPN. Also, just considering the gross excess of sports happening right now. NFL opening weekend, I guess, is kind of a regular part of the competition for the Open, but just everything else, like NBA playoffs, baseball, hockey playoffs, is just a lot.
Dominic Thiem, the story on the men's side, of course, but I think there was a lot of interesting happenings around the men's side and who kind of emerged. If we take a whistle stop tour, Bush, Daniil Medvedev, I honestly, I was a little disappointed. It wasn't a meltdown maybe against Dominic Thiem in that first set, but I think it was like a callback to maybe last year. He was trying to remind people who he was for some reason, but I thought totally derailed him. And not to say that he was a better player than Dominic Thiem, but I thought his match with Rublev for a straight set match was one of the more captivating ones. But we talk about the next tier of guys after the big three. It's Thiem, it's Zverev. What did you make of Medvedev's performance?
Another solid tournament, right? He went to the final last year, semi-final this time, and I believe I put in our Discord channel a very funny comment that I saw that if you imagine that Daniil Medvedev is a Wii tennis player, he looks like he's playing like that, which I thought was very amusing.
Giri's tweet about watching Medvedev, I thought summed it up well as well, because I don't think you can sum it up at all. It doesn't make any sense, man.
Yeah, it's everything about his technique is wild.
So just touching on the post Big Three world, and you mentioned Medvedev in particular. So he's a guy who's going to be at the Business Center tournaments for a very long time. But I just want to come full circle on Thiem just to close that one out. I think we tend to forget, right, that this was someone that we laughed at off a clay court in a lot of ways, and we have to pay a lot of respect to the fact that this is someone who's done a hell of a lot of hard work to become a very good hard court player. If you look at his US Open record prior to getting to this final, he made a quarterfinal in 2018. He got dumped in the first round last year, and he'd never been past the fourth round prior to that. And then, of course, you look at his record on Australia, second round up to last year and finalist this year. Indian Wells last year, beating Roger Federer as well. So there are examples of someone who has made that transition. And we tend to forget this, right? To do that past the age of 22, 23, to become fully the player that we didn't really expect it in a lot of ways. We thought he was a wonderful clay court player, but we didn't know that the strokes would shorten enough to play on a hard court. I think the speed of this US Open court helped him immensely because this thing was slow as anything. It was slow as sandpaper. If you're watching these two play, and you want to know as another reason if I'd bring this up of why the US Open ratings might be down, is it was painful to watch people trying to hit winners past each other on this court, but that's another story. So to sort of circle that out, I'm incredibly proud of the work that Thiem did to really win this Grand Slam and to make that transition from being a clay courter to a faster surface player. And I think someone like Medvedev and someone like Zverev, in a world without those big three, we're going to see these guys at the top end for a very long time.
I have to eat some crow and possibly sell my shares in Lakehold, which I talked up big time ahead of this tournament. I'm like, this new surface is fast, it's in charge, it's going to make for excellent quick strike tennis, which was not the case. All the big surfers lost relatively early, and we got into basically some clay court death slogs on the baseline. You know that team match against Djokovic in the ATP finals last year in the round robin? I thought that was a big moment for Dominic on a hard court. I think he was superb throughout up until the final against Tsitsipas, but I thought that match was huge for him because there was a lot on the line for Novak as well there. And I don't think just to hit the backhand the way he does, the amount of strength, the amount of work he's put in. I know his body almost failed him here, but this is because he's been pushing it to the line at all points. And I thought it was interesting when he lost in the first round of the Western and Southern Open. I saw some people saying it's better for him to not even play the Masters and just get used to the courts on the ground and practice at his own speed to his own accord. So rather than rush into a bunch of matches like his competitors did, this guy came in really fresh, and it paid off in a big way with the biggest win of his life. Next gen wise, Giri, I think we saw, in terms of the Canadian lens, we saw Dennis and Felix make very positive inroads, respectively. Felix losing to the eventual champion, but Dennis mounting a huge comeback against Taylor Fritz, only to fall to PCB. Simon and I have talked about this forever, so I'm curious to hear what your take on this is. But out of the two, maybe who do you rate with a higher shot to make a really big dent, maybe even quickly at the French Open?
Between Felix and Chapo, you mean?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think I'm going to go with Chapo now. The comparison is difficult, but I do feel like at the top end, Chapo has just impressed me more on a match by match basis. I think Felix is praised for kind of his even temperament and consistency in his results, but he hasn't quite had that breakthrough that makes me. I think his only top two wins still are both against Steph, which seems to be its own kind of strange mental trap that Tsitsipas found himself in, because he said he's had trouble beating him since juniors. So I'm still kind of waiting for that moment from Felix. And also I think Chapo's clay results, if I remember right, he made a semi on a clay masters in 2018, and generally got acclimated to the surface a lot faster than I thought, just given how aggressive his game is. I think his movement makes him a good fit for clay as well. I think I could see him making a solid run in, 2 weeks? It feels insane that another slam is about to start. Yeah.
We record this on a Sunday night. The clay season starts in Italy in 5 hours. So yeah, it's upsetting. It's upsetting how quickly this is happening. Bush, I think the way Chapo lost, tough. The way Felix lost, probably a sign. I mean, you lost the way the first set went against Thiem, I think was promising. We also saw that flip kind of switch that happens in tennis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we tend to forget as well just how well he played against Mute, just to outright demolish someone who I do believe is going to be a top 30 player, top 20 player in his career. So flashes have been there. He's still young. He's going to climb in the rankings again. As I check the live rankings, he's going to be 17th when it comes. So new career high for him. Wow. Chapo up to 13th in the ranking as well. So, you know, we're talking about players who are at the business end of things now, right? They're in the top 20. They're firmly placed in there. And I would just call quickly attention. We mentioned it briefly on the podcast last week, but I do think Chapo working with Rohan Bapana in doubles as well. They made the quarterfinals. They lost. They put up a good fight, but someone who is 40 years of age and someone who's been there and done that and had the wisdom, he was very much in the corner. You saw him in the camp. You saw Chapo yelling at him on multiple occasions during the match against Serena Busta as well. But
that's true friendship, right?
Well, that's when you know you're true friendships.
You're making me lose.
I do think that's really helpful for him because it's someone that we coached by his mother, obviously brought Mikhail Yuzhny into the camp, but just another real senior figure. And I was incredibly impressed with the way that Chapo hit the ball. His consistency has improved tremendously. And I know there was a lot of finger pointing around this loss to Carino Busta, just the fact that he was wild in some of his strokes. But honestly, that's the most consistent I've ever seen him play. And we're talking about fine margins here. If we just get 5% more consistent in a positive direction, we're talking at a player who's going to be very, very good on a hard court for a long time. I'm still very, very unconvinced about him on a clay court or on a grass court, just given his footwork and the length of the strokes required. But we'll see. I'm willing to eat crow on that one because I really didn't think that he had this level of consistency in him longer term. And clearly that's been proven incorrect. You don't take 5 sets from a guy like Carino Busta who's making you hit so many balls consistently. And you watch that, I bring that to the court again. Chapo's hitting shots that it should be past an opponent. And in that Carino Busta match, he's hitting 3 or 4 winners on other surfaces, on quicker surfaces, and Carino Busta's just bunting the ball back in the court. So he's going to learn from that. He's going to come back stronger from this. But that live ranking is an indication of where we're at with these two, right? We have 2 very, very good young players and players who are very close to being top 10.
The 5th set debate always is well heated in Grand Slam time. I think it came about again this week, and especially today as we record right after the final. Giri, your thoughts? Has it changed? Are you still? I saw you put out a pretty interesting idea a couple of nights ago.
Yeah. I guess the first thing that's on my mind is I wouldn't want to politicize this specific match too much. I don't think it's a case for or against best of 5 tennis. It's just kind of a case against tennis. And I feel like the idea that I floated last week, I could probably still get behind. I'm not sure it would resolve this specific situation, but the idea was, have both tours play this format. First week, best of 3. Second week, best of 5. We'd still find ourselves in this pickle of this particular match, but I think it could speed things along. Especially some of the scheduling stuff in the first week of a major, which is really clogged up and can lead to some very strange match timings.
Simon, 5 sets, still yay for you?
Yeah, I don't mind that idea at all. I was chatting about it with another listener of this podcast today as well, who brought that idea up as well. And I think there's a lot of legitimacy to that idea. I think it would remove a lot of the naysayers, and it finds a nice happy medium in it. I'm a big 5-set fan. I'm not a big 5-set fan when this happens. let me be honest. Let me be wonderfully clear about this. Is that this was not particularly good for the sport. I think actually in the long run, the final set and just the storyline, I think when it flashes up on SportsCenter and your casual fans come along, watching, your number 3 and number 7 in the world basically look like they're beginners trying to get the ball back in the court. I don't think, did Thiem did he come over the top? Did he hit an aggressive topspin backhand in the last 4 games of that match? He was slicing everything.
I don't think so. No. Yeah, I don't think so.
It's hard when you're hitting your return from Jakarta, so I feel like that's probably why.
No kidding.
The combination of serve quality and return position was, I hope, unprecedented and never to be seen again in tennis. I like one of those things individually, I think I can enjoy, but both of them together was a little too much.
I think with this formation of the new PTPA, my idea of banning certain players from being allowed to play 5 sets is probably not going to go through based on certain leverages and player votes, etc. But this is exactly it. And my thing is, like, not everything has to be epic or sensational, or like not every 5-set match has to be considered that way. And I was saying this off air, but the 2019 Wimbledon final, we remember it for that tiebreak, and we remember it for Fed having those match points or championship points, and we remember Novak eating the grass. But like, the match itself was not that great. But I think we lionize so much of these 5-set matches because they just go extremely long. They go long, but that doesn't mean that they're super high quality. And I think another part of the discourse, and I think this is far beyond this tournament, but the way we talk about who is choking and what is making someone choke, and the discourse that I've seen, at least in the aftermath of this, is less that Zverev choked, and I think that's good, but I find it interesting that we talk way differently about women's players when this goes down, when a women's player cannot hold their serve to hold on to a match. I think the way that's discussed is far different, and that's something that tennis just simply has a really shitty track record of, I think.
Won't find any disagreements on me, Divine.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
See, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. It's been a while, 2 weeks, but I wanted to ask each of you guys maybe a storyline or a player from the last couple of weeks that maybe was your favorite, or one of your things that you enjoyed the most, Simon.
So I'm gonna pick Pablo Carreño Busta. It's not often that you get someone making the semi-final of a major and knocked out the world number 1. He did it on his own merit. Obviously, knocked him out in straight sets. No one needs to look that up ever. It's an amazing result for Carreño Busta. Destroyed Novak's without any problems.
Remember that happened? Novak smoked a ball linesperson in the throat. Remember that?
And I think just with PCB, he's one of those players that, to be 27th in the world, and if you ever saw him hitting down at your local tennis club, you would watch someone who just never misses a ball, ever. He would just stand there and hit all day, and you would watch someone like that and just think, how does that man ever lose a tennis match when the ball never goes outside of the lines? And I think that's just the truth about someone who is that consistent and who is that wily. So a wonderful tournament for him, getting to a second major semi-final. All the Nick Kyrgios stuff was funny as well prior to it. Also hearing Johnny Mac learning of that firsthand on the air as Chris Fowler tries to explain.
That was good. That was good.
I thought it was wonderfully hilarious.
I love that. That was good.
So yeah, if I was going to pick a single one out, it would be Pablo Carreño Busta.
I'm going to go with not necessarily a guy who played the flashiest matches, although he did have one good one, but I really liked thinking about Alex Deemer just in terms of, I'm just curious what kind of role he's going to play in the tour going forward. He's obviously very, very good, very fast, very consistent. He doesn't have the pace to hit through the court. He doesn't have the serve. And I'm kind of curious what are the range of possible outcomes for a player like this? It does seem like he's going to make it to the second week of a lot of majors. I could see maybe a top end, like Nishikori kind of result for him where he, everything lines up. He's playing out of his mind. He makes a major final. Otherwise, runs up against some of the big dogs, loses too much, or just loses too much gas in the first week of a major playing these marathon matches. But I think he's a really interesting player, really fun to watch. Someone pointed out, I'm trying to remember, but he tends to bring out exciting flashes from the other player just because of how he draws out points and his athleticism tracking things down. So I find him a fun watch, and I'm just curious to see where things go for him.
I was going to pick...
to make sure.
Go ahead, sorry, yeah.
Okay, yeah, just want to make sure he gets credit for his 5-set win over Kachanov was pretty impressive.
I want to make sure he gets credit for his mustache as well. It takes some real stones to pull off a thin mustache like that.
And looking like he snuck into the bubble as a middle schooler and then entered the draw and won several matches against good players. He's a good. I mean, it seems like he's learning from the Leighton Hewitt Bible of just working his ass off and not being great at anything, but just being good at enough things. So I wonder if that's good enough to win a slam today. Probably not, like it was back in Hewitt's time, but definitely a problem out for a lot of guys. Good shouts. You know, I'm going to pick a specific match. It might have been on the very first day, but Cam Norrie, Diego Schwartzman. Cam Norrie won in 5 sets, but it was on one of those way far out courts where the TV angle was static and the commentators were half watching and just talking trash for most of it. And Cam Norrie slowly, kind of just re-entered the match. And it got serious, and I think it's way easier to appreciate how good these guys are when you see them in smaller courts, because it does make it seem a little more plausible that you could be watching it at one of your own courts. So you could be seeing it as you're waiting to play yourself. And it gave you that intimate feel. And you're like, holy crap, these guys are super good. Schwartzman is a fantastic top player, 9th player seeded in this tournament. But Cam Norrie, just as good, and he's highly ranked. He's good enough, but it feels like these guys are playing on a court that's just down the street from me. And with no fans, it made that feel doubly so. So just one single moment that I enjoyed out of watching 9,000 hours of tennis and things bleeding together.
I'll put this out there to all of you because I think you'll find it amusing. You know when you're at the sports desk and you're like, I'm going to pitch the editor something. I'm imagining Devang going up to his sports editor and saying, that Cam Norrie, Diego Schwartzman first round. I got 1,000 words in me on that.
Yeah. Have you guys seen how short Diego Schwartzman is? That's 500 words alone, right? That's important.
we laugh here. I've had a Diego Schwartzman profile kind of in the chamber for 2 years running. I'm waiting for. I really thought this could have been his open to make his run. But I'm a huge fan, and I'm also fascinated by how he makes it work.
Awesome. Anything else, guys, from the ATP side before we head over to the women's side?
Any disappointments? Any players you were expecting more from?
Ooh.
I think I was. Well, I'll start it with a caveat that I do think Medvedev is just a different tier of player right now. But I was bummed by how quickly Frances Tiafoe went out in that match.
Right.
I think had there been a crowd, it would have been a really fun dynamic and probably would have made things more interesting, but just not a fun watch.
This is not to disparage either player, but I think the Tiafoe Millman is the perfect level for each guy. And
yes.
That is where they both will firmly find themselves in the tour. But I think that tier might not be attainable for Francis Bush.
Yeah, and I think I've said this before on the podcast that I see them as career 20 to 40. That's kind of the limit. Interesting on the de Minaur point as well. De Minaur and Chapeau exact same class, exact same year. I think de Minaur's, I want to say like 15 days older than Chapo. So they're kind of basically at the exact same point in their career. And I think, is de Minaur top 4, top 30, I want to say at the moment? He's been in the top 20 at some point in his career as well. So he's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I do think he's an interesting person, as you bring up, Gary. Other person perhaps slightly disappointed is Tsitsipas. Just this is a tournament that was...
Oh, wow.
You want to talk about people who are glad the Novak thing went down? Stefanos' dad must be like, all right, this is a good week for me. No one remembers that batshit insanity that happened in that match.
Look how far we got without even remembering it.
Right? I was looking at the draw today as just putting the outline together, and Zverev's road was so strange to me to the final. But that big hole, I think, where Coric is, it should have been Tsitsipas, and I wonder... A Tsitsipas Thiem final probably is better. And maybe that's where we ask the final question here. But does this matchup do anything for you guys, this Zverev Thiem? If we're thinking about what we could see in the future, does this particular matchup, do you think this is a one-off? Like, could this be interesting, I guess, Simon?
I do think the idea of it perhaps is better than the reality of it, because I think we tend to place a lot of emphasis upon the players that we think we're getting and not necessarily the reality that's been put in front of us. And this is kind of the case to really go to square the circle and bring us back to this final in a lot of ways. Alex Zverev has been a player who has had the same weaknesses since he's reached the top 5 in the world. And you always come back to it. And this is the first thing they teach you in tennis, in coaching levels, is what do you rely on? When the pressure is on you, what is the shot or what is the thing that you always go back to? And you saw it in this final specifically with Zverev. The thing that he went back to was missing his second serve and standing 90 feet behind the baseline playing defensively. Even though what got him into the position of being able to be up 2 sets to love was standing on the baseline and hitting aggressively and reminding everyone that he's 6'6" and can power the ball. And I think that the same is true with Thiem, right? Yeah, he stands so far behind the baseline, but the thing that really got him across the line in the end was just ability to hit big swinging forehands and going for the fences when it actually mattered. And I know his body broke down on him, but you would say that the more aggressive player through the third, fourth, and fifth set managed to win that final. And I do think that is probably the difference between those two players in terms of what that matchup looks like.
I think that's fair. And I think there was some justice in the end, because of the guys who quote unquote went for it, Dominic Thiem really did towards the end of that 5th set. I think it was 3 forehands in a row that were match winning worthy, and they were. And now we have a new Grand Slam champion. I think that alone is exciting enough to think about as we go forward into the French Open. But that's enough of the men's side. We move after the break to the women's side of the bracket, the US Open, the good side, many would argue. Coming up right after this. Welcome back to the Open Air podcast. On the women's side, Naomi Osaka captured her second US Open title, defeating Victoria Azarenka 1-6, 6-3, 6-3. From beginning to end, this was predicted to be an unpredictable draw because Naomi Osaka was hurt in the Western Southern Open. She didn't finish that tournament. She was supposed to play Azarenka in the final there. We got that final on Saturday, Giri. Overall, I thought it was fitting because I think these are the two best players over the last almost 4 weeks now.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I forgot how much I enjoyed watching Vika Azarenka play tennis also. I think this was just not just this tournament, but Cincinnati also is kind of a bracing reminder of that, just how much game she has. And the match itself was very compelling, even though I do wish they had both been kind of playing at their top level at the same time. It had a bit of a seesaw quality, but towards the end it got very dicey and interesting. Yeah, just huge hitting from Naomi down the stretch. Very fun watch, very impressive from her. Simon,
I think you've been high on Naomi Osaka for a long time. Not to say you were an outlier. I think a lot of people were, but not only was the injury concern, I think, worrying about Cincinnati and how that tournament ended. But I think it's a different animal when you get to the Grand Slam level. And though the environment was very different with no fans, I think the amount of pressure on someone like Osaka, where the draw is supposed to be unpredictable, she still was a favorite in every match she played. And I think that aspect made how she handled from the beginning against Doi, her countrywoman, to the end that much more impressive.
No, absolutely. And I think she's a perfect parallel to talk about with the men's final in a lot of ways with Sasha Zverev, because could you say at any point in that final against Victoria Azarenka that you didn't believe that Naomi Osaka had the mental strength to come back and win that final? Even withstanding a barrage coming down the opposite end from her, she did not play well, but she was not allowed to play well. And I think that's the best thing you can say about that first set that Azarenka put together. It was astonishing to watch because she stood right in the middle of the court and she did what she did best, which is blast balls and winners past her opponent without anyone really getting near it. And Osaka just did what she did really well, which is grind, which is stay in it, which is keep making balls, which is problem solve on court. And outside of Serena, and I think this is what I know this is going to be hyperbolic, but I haven't seen a player in tennis in a very long time who has the mental strength that Naomi Osaka has. What is her record? She's undefeated when she makes the quarterfinals of a Grand Slam at this point. Her record, if you just look up, she has some astonishing stuff when she reaches the Grand Slam finals. She's an amazing, amazing athlete, and we are lucky to have her at the pinnacle of our sport.
They asked her on court why what her intention was of wearing the mask featuring Americans who have been shot by police, African Americans who have been shot by police. Her response was, the point is to make people start talking. I think she did that and more so over the last 2 weeks. And I think she made a lot of the people covering the sport acknowledge some uncomfortable areas that they were not comfortable acknowledging. And I think that is the whole point of what Naomi Osaka was doing it. So she was destroying it on the court and off the court as well. But I thought the women's side was the best side of this tournament. And I thought Thursday night was the best night of this tournament. One of the best nights of Grand Slam tennis, perhaps in the last 5 years, I would say. And I think I called this draw unpredictable, but I love the way Jennifer Brady was playing coming into the US Open. Someone who hits the ball that clean and moves that well and is reliable from both wings will be a problem. And I thought Brady Osaka was a wonderful match of two people hitting the shit out of the ball, but in very firm control of what they were doing. And then you saw Serena and Vika right after that, where you have two tacticianers who basically have been in every situation you can be in a Grand Slam setting, and they had to adapt to what they were confronting. But it's a segue into Serena Bush, and I think that number 24, is that going to happen? I think at this point, it's a bit of a, like, is that the most important thing anyways, really? I guess is the first question, Simon.
Well, apparently it is to ESPN because we heard about it every bloody minute that she was, which I don't mean to sound disrespectful about that because it's an incredible achievement and I hope she gets that record because I think it's good for our sport overall in general. But my goodness, you're watching a US broadcast and by goodness, don't ESPN know how to beat that drum to as much as they possibly can. She is and still remains a threat to win a Grand Slam anytime she's in the draw. However, the level's caught up with her, and that's just the reality when you turn 39. I think she is within a group of women. There's probably comfortably 4 to 8 women who, if they're in a draw, you would back them to make a deep run, but you wouldn't suggest in any capacity that they're favorites to win a tournament. And I don't think she is still. I wouldn't say that at this point in time. I would say that she is a overwhelming favorite in the latter stages of Grand Slams now, just simply because people have caught up with her. And she could still win a Grand Slam, and I still probably suspect she will get another one, but it's going to be difficult for her, and she's getting older. The body will break down, and there was a few little things that kind of went unnoticed as well. She changed the racket in the off-season, smaller head size slightly, lowered the swing weight a little bit just to get a bit more maneuverability. And you don't tend to do that. You don't tend to see people who've won 23 Grand Slams mess with their equipment too much if they don't think they need to make a few minor changes to get over that line.
It was extremely impressive run in the sense that I'm not sure I watched her play 2 consecutive sets where she was just flashing like true Serena Williams tennis. She ended up doing that at every match at one point or another. But there was just kind of a lot of good problem solving and resilience in a lot of those matches to make things work. Even when I think even the Sloane match comes to mind as one where I thought it was totally over for her. I think she was down a break in the second set. Sloane was kind of playing in that Sloane way where everything just looks so relaxed and comfortable. She's getting to every ball with plenty of time, just kind of rolling it deep into the corners. And Serena didn't seem to have an answer for it, but she did. She came back. She won very convincingly, and she kind of kept doing that match after match. And kind of in the same boat as Bush there, where I wouldn't peg her as the favorite for any given Grand Slam, but always in the mix anytime she's in the draw. And yeah, we're going to see certain aspects of her game slow down. The movement certainly wasn't there every single match. I think especially in the opening set against Vika, it very much was. And it was almost jarring in a good way to see how well she was moving around out there. But that is certainly one aspect of her game that we'll probably see erode with time.
Serena's footwork in the Stevens match, that first set, was perhaps the worst I had seen from her in a very long time, and it looked like she was just not up for it at all. But the fact that the change was made, and I think she found to play Sloane Stevens, sometimes you have to hit the ball directly in the middle of the court and let Stevens dictate, and sometimes it'll go poorly for Sloane, and it did there. And I thought the problem solving, her tennis mind has always been there, but I think Serena's had to rely on that far more as the years go on, obviously, because that's just how athletics work. And I think she has the ability to do that, like we saw at this tournament. But I think you guys hit it. I understand why the broadcasters will harp on this. It is a big draw for the rando sports fan who is flipping channels. She's always going to be a big draw, but I think it'd be better for everyone if some expectations are put in check. And also the idea that Serena's going to be in this conversation for a bit longer. And I think that idea of the door shutting completely is probably wrong, because I look at someone like Victoria Azarenka and door shutting, and that door was definitely slammed. I think a big line of the commentary, not just on the television broadcast, but around the tennis world, was the fact that you had so many moms completing late into the tournament. Perankova, Serena Williams, Kim Clijsters was there in this tournament as well. But Azarenka in general, Giri, I saw you wrote something following that win against Serena. This is something that I think will continue. I think Victoria Azarenka is going to be a problem for the rest of the tour.
Yeah, I love that. Bringing the basketball parlance over to tennis. I think Azarenka is a bucket right now. She made an interesting comment after the final, which was that she was excited about clay, and had been actually having more fun on it recently than in recent seasons than she had earlier in her career. I could definitely see her bringing some of the momentum to that surface. And I think one thing that was nice about the way things lined up inside the bubble is that two players who hadn't lost a match ended up playing the US Open final. Very clearly the two best players through that stretch, and just playing with a lot of confidence and just clarity. It just seems very clear to me what she's trying to do on the court, and don't feel that way about that many players coming back from the kind of layoff she just had. So very impressive.
I look at who she beat on the way to the final, and it's a lot of the people who are going to be in the WTA conversation for long after, in terms of how much promise they have, from Sabalenka to Swiatek to Muchova. A lot of very, very good young players. Elise Mertens, who's solid as a rock. I thought the players that Vika beat, this showed where her level is at, because these are no slouches. These are players with all-rounding games, and she dismantled them, and it's a very promising sign, because I think she will be a problem wherever she lines up going forward in this cramped together schedule. I mentioned Jen Brady briefly, but I wonder if this is a reprieve for the American college tennis scene, Bush, because the idea is that if you end up going to school, you're not going to be a super big time player, correct? And I think perhaps Jen Brady's not going to change that, but it might open the door maybe to throw some respect back on the collegiate system.
Hope so, yeah. She was magnificent, wasn't she? Talk about a player that you thought deserved to be the position that she was in. She could have easily won that match against Osaka as well. She struck the ball beautifully. Her timing is impeccable. I think that's one thing that doesn't get talked about enough with it. She just sees the ball so well and connects. The ball's always in front of her. She's never chasing balls. Her timing is just it's wonderful to watch. And the power that she generates is really quite remarkable. Actually, that match in the semi-final, you just say two of the best ball strikers in the world going at it. It was wonderful to watch. And yeah, I think some respectability back to that side of things. I'm in favor of people going down the collegiate route if that's what they want to do, because clearly we've seen examples of it being successful. I think she's got a real big future, and that's silly of me to say as someone who just made a semi-final at a major, but she's outrageously talented. And I'm excited to see her for the rest of this year, honestly. I'm really curious to see what she does on the on the clay, sorry. Not a great record, obviously, at the French Open. She's been dumped out in the first round, I believe, twice and only made a second round. I believe this is the furthest she's ever made at a Grand Slam by a significant margin. So not a good track record, but we'll wait and see. She's definitely going to take confidence out of this tournament, and in that quick turnaround, in the 25-second turnaround that they have before they're going to play on the clay, I hope that she's going to have a really good run there.
Definitely one of my favorite runs by an American player in recent memory. A lot of friends going nuts about her forehand technique. I would love to see more of that kind of wristy Western motion on the WTA. I think it was very disruptive to a lot of her opponents. I feel the amount of spin she generates is probably pretty different from the norm. And she can just uncork that from any position on the court and immediately gain leverage over the point. So super fun player to watch. Very clean and skilled ball striker. I could see how things could be lining up for her in a way that this is sustainable going forward. All the pieces are there.
I mentioned Naomi Osaka addressing wearing the masks and bringing light to social justice movements. But I was curious what you guys thought of ESPN's commentary and some of the other commentary you saw at the tournament, because I thought there's two Black Lives Matter and the mother's narrative was two things that I thought they really tried to hit home on, and for good intentions for the most part. I can't read people's minds, but I thought for the most part the intentions were good. But I always find it interesting where the mistakes are made, or where I think for us viewing or for us watching from a different perspective, we can acknowledge God, that was a terrible idea. I wonder how you guys kind of saw how they handled it. Simon, maybe start with you.
I thought, given their target audience and given who they have on the broadcast, I thought they actually did a relatively decent job of at least trying to pay lip service to it. Let's not forget that during the advert breaks for the US Open, we're being served adverts for Rolex, Emirates Air, Grey Goose Vodka. So we're talking about a extraordinarily wealthy category of people who are watching this tournament, and that's really where their bread is buttered. That's where I'm sure the advert revenue comes from. And I don't want to, that sounds like I'm suggesting that all rich people are not in favor of the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm certainly not that. I'm sure oh God, I've dug myself into a big hole now. Someone quickly throw me a lifeline here on this one. But no, I think ESPN have done a reasonable job with that. I don't know that they particularly went out on a limb at any possibility, but I think they did exactly what they had to, which is play very neutral, down the middle storytelling in that regards. But I thought it was a shame that they did not show Corday's Defund the Police t-shirt in the final. I thought that was disappointing. I thought it was hilarious and immediately looked up to see where I could buy one of those whilst watching that final, because I thought it was very amusing. But I think for the most part, they did a neutral, middling job in terms of bringing light to that issue.
Yeah, I think neutral and middling is about the diagnosis I'd give it to. Obviously not the group of people best equipped to talk about a lot of these things. How
Right.
Huge counterexample to that in the sense that we have a tennis player who has literal direct experience with police brutality. And I think he was underused. It could be that I missed a lot of the matches where he was kind of taking these topics head on, but I would have loved to see him in the booth and asking pointed questions to the audience in ways that some of the older, wider commentary were not really equipped to do. So I think maybe underusing James, who's also, I really enjoyed his commentary from a tennis perspective as well. And I think most of the commentary was well intentioned, but obviously that one incident where I don't remember who it was, but Naomi Osaka was asked.
It was Renee Stubbs.
Oh, that sounds right. Yeah, she was asked for a hint.
Yeah.
About which mask of a victim of police brutality she was going to wear next, as if it was some kind of game show. That's just rough all around. All things considered, I think if literally 5 minutes had been set aside to consider how to ask certain questions carefully or how to raise certain subjects carefully, this probably could have gone more smoothly. But again, it's a tough ask for these people. And I think the point is to create discomfort, and I'm very impressed by the extent to which Naomi Osaka in particular pulled that off. Creating that discomfort is a lot of the value of what she's doing.
I thought when Alexandra Stevenson was brought on the broadcast as well, to go with that James Blake point, Giri, you mentioned, I thought that was positive, and it was better discourse perhaps than that was offered by the regular panel. The people who are watching, I think that's a fair point, Bush. Like, first of all, the Rolex ad has replaced a lot of childhood memories in my mind, because it's just, it aired, I felt like every 15 minutes, but it's true in terms of who is watching this. And I think Bomani Jones raised this point. If the people who are absorbing this message are the people who will probably react the most negatively to it, then that is the point for sure. I mean, and that will get people talking. But I think middling is definitely a fair synopsis, and I think I could count, or I did. At one point I was writing this down, but you could kind of notch every uncomfortable moment on air when someone had to acknowledge something perhaps that they weren't ready to, and it made for some very weird on-air moments, but there was not enough of them, I thought. And to go on your point, the Jason Goodall, Darren Cahill, James Blake, if there's an all-male commentary team, put those guys together, because I thought I don't know how they divvy out straws for who got the final, but I thought it was a very weird selection, because overall I thought that the commentary was all over the place. And now just talking about on court, I thought the creme de la creme, and we get the world feed option up in Canada where we watch, and I think it's all over the place. You have Taylor Dent talking mad spicy about stuff that, like, he's talking about how he hates the backhand slice so vehemently. He talked about this for an entire set and a half about how much he hated the backhand slice. I'm like, what is going on? This is a match, man. But I almost would rather that than scenarios where I thought there was a Jen Brady cheering fest going on during that Osaka match, and I resorted to muting a lot of it. But I understand it's not exactly for the tennis homers, the commentary. I get that. They're supposed to just call like they see it, but not even that was done at times. And I felt like just showing tennis sometimes was thought of as unthinkable. But that complaint's not going to go away anytime. Yeah.
No, it's certainly not. And I think there's a big generational gap. James Blake, I think, was very good. I thought Stevenson was pretty good as well in terms of some of the analysis that she brought to this. But it desperately, that broadcast feels old and stale and boring, and it feels like it is a different generation trying to comment on issues which they are not comfortable with, they're not a part of, or have not been a part of throughout their career or their life. Certainly politically, it certainly suggests that. Just given what we've seen over the last sort of 50 years in terms of what social movements have looked like. So I think it doesn't seem like ESPN as a broadcaster is particularly interested in doing that at something like tennis, which I think is good that Naomi Osaka brings that sort of thing, because it forces at least them as a broadcaster to reflect upon whether or not they have the right voices talking about it. And even with someone like James Blake, right, I think he was actually a revelation in terms of some of the things that he poured out on court and in his commentary. But let's not forget in a certain way that James Blake is 40 years old. Like James Blake is almost double the age of Naomi Osaka, right? So, in terms of what his sort of he perhaps has not grown up with the level of vitriol that's been directed at her on social media, just the pressure that comes with that as well, and just the fact that, let's be honest here, how many players through history on the men's side, even on the women's side, have made as strong a social statement as Naomi Osaka has? You would certainly argue that someone like Billie Jean King has, who has been phenomenal, I think, over the last few weeks in terms of some of her support that she's given out to Naomi Osaka. Obviously, the Williams sisters have gone about that in a different way as well, but you would argue they've also put social messaging at the front and center. Martina Navratilova gets pretty thin after that, doesn't it? And it gets even more thin on the men's side. So you can't say there's someone who they've put on the broadcast who knows how to walk that walk. And I'm upset that even bringing on someone like Billie Jean King for more segments, I think would have been a good thing, just to sort of talk about that and maybe give a perspective on it. But it was sadly missing that in some ways.
I will say it did introduce an interesting new commentary dynamic that I hope continues, which is, at least in the case of Alexandra Stevenson and Chrissy Everett, two commentators just getting sick of each other over the course of a broadcast in real time. Definitely adds a kind of parallel entertainment alongside the sports match.
I can talk outside of the realms of the tennis world, but it's a hard F for Chrissy Everett in this whole 2 weeks. I thought she was very poor through the whole broadcast and really did not enjoy her commentary at all. I think she's been good in the past. I think she's like Johnny Mack in that regard, is they started out okay and it's slowly become more and more phoned in, and it becomes a little more grating and a bit more annoying when there are actually really important issues being raised and you don't really have people who are equipped to talk about that.
Boy, talking about a lightning rod, I think between European tennis Twitter and North American tennis Twitter, Chrissy Everett is a very divisive figure. But I think people were falling on your side there, Bush. I get it. Like, I get like chatting and like having a nice familiar tone, but boy, oh boy, there was some loose moments throughout the past couple of weeks, and I don't expect them to be perfect, but I think we should have expectations. Perhaps the fact that we didn't have expectations before is why they're able to skirt things for so long. And again, I get it, Rolex, Aston Martin, etc., but I think they can work harder on this. On the WTA side, fellas, before we wrap up, anything else that caught your eye over the last couple of weeks? I know we talked about 30 players having a shot at this, but I think it was fair to say I thought there's so much good tennis all around, and the variety we saw. I thought Muchova was someone I loved watching as well, and I think injuries maybe kind of derailed her at the end there, but so many good matches that I probably do. Like, I think Shelby Rogers Kvitova in the fourth round was a fantastic match. There's just so much good stuff all around the grounds.
Caroline Markova's a real player, isn't she? She's definitely got Grand Slam potential in her future. And she's a fun one. I'm looking forward to seeing her over the next 2 years because she has it all. She actually looks a little bit like Andreescu in a lot of ways that she plays, with the power and some of the variety that she has in her game. So I do see a good future for her. I
just want to give a shout out to Perankova for just what an enjoyable watch she is. Some of that crafty, little bit of junk ball, a little bit of grass court tennis in the middle of the U.S. Open, and just a very fun run. She almost pulled off the upset as well at the end there.
Her first tournament since the 2017 Wimbledon Championships ended with almost beating Serena Williams at the U.S. Open. Right? Totally normal. Amazing. Well, it was a fantastic U.S. Open on the women's side. Before we shut it down this week, we'll come back for the final segment. It's our parting shots coming up right after the break. Welcome back to the Open Air Podcast. It's the final segment, parting shots. You know what? I'm going to be selfish and do the honors myself this week. Bianca Andreescu withdrew from the Italian Open, citing the knee injury that's hampered her for over a year now. She hasn't played since October 2019. When she retired from a match against Karolina Pliskova, her coach Sylvain Bruneau did some media the past week, basically casting more doubt on Bianca's availability for the French Open. I think the prognosis from doctors or Twitter doctors or people who know what they're talking about when it comes to athletes and their bodies, which is a shit ton of them on Twitter, they're writing Bianca off. And I think it's fair to be very uneasy about the future. But I thought seeing Genie Bouchard make the run she did in Istanbul this week, where she lost in the final but really pulled off some big wins, getting back into the top 150 in the rankings. It's a crazy climb back from a pretty big fall from someone that was thought to be the future of Canadian tennis. So I guess what I'm saying is, though, even though it looks pretty grim right now for Bianca and we're not sure when she's going to play again, I think tennis has shown us that there is no singular timeline. There is no set path of events you have to follow to make it back to wherever it is you want to make it back to. But I think the fact that Genie Bouchard is still playing today and still finding the will to make it back to where she once was means that you can't really write off anyone, even though it looks pretty grim for Bianca. So I will voice a positive note in these extremely dark times. Thoughts, gentlemen?
Okay, well, soon, Bianca. We'd like to have you back on tour.
Yeah, if I'm just thinking of maybe the single player I was most excited to watch in 2020, so to see how far we got into the year without really getting to see her play has been a bummer.
On that positive note, Simon, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, a parting shot, quite literally. So grab your drinks out, everyone, pour yourself one as we wish and say our best wishes to the line staff of Grand Slams who will never be seen after this tournament again. So pour one out for them, given some of the calls that, certainly in that Shapo match. Shapo made 9 correct calls to terrible
Shocking.
lines. So,
Shocking, yeah.
Shocking. It seems the players are really happy with the use of Hawkeye Live. We had the infamous Danny Medvedev meltdown, which was truly wonderful. He has to be one of the most funny players on tour, honestly. Just him launching into a tirade at the match official was one of the more funny things I've seen in a long time. Had to actually stop what I was doing and turn up the television to watch. The level of sarcasm dripping off his tongue was wonderful. But I feel like we're in a safe position, and I hope everyone agrees with this, that line staff can go. I don't like seeing people lose their jobs, all for strong unions and all that sort of stuff. But it's one of those that clearly the technology has superseded the ability of our lines judges. We've clearly got the technology. So let's give them a big payoff. Let's give them all pensions for the rest of their lives, and they can go and have a nice drive around California when it's not on fire. So let's get Hawkeye Live in, and let's never have lines judges at Grand Slams again.
The hilarity of players challenging robotic calls in Cincinnati at that tournament it gave me a few chuckles, but there was a part of me that missed the human element heading into the US Open. But I'm with you, Simon. I think it's time to tip our cap. Just give technology its due. It beat us again. It's time. We've lost this battle, and it's just time to move forward.
It is true, and that's how it should be. That's how it should work, is that you are supposed to get beaten by a robot, and you are supposed to move on with your life.
They had a good run.
All right, Gary, close it up.
Yeah, this was a thought I had earlier in the week, and then it became incredibly clear just in the contrast of these two finals we had this weekend. But if I were in the ATP, if I were organizing ATP players and thinking about the appeal of my sport, I think I'd be pretty desperate to hitch my bandwagon to the excitement around someone like Naomi Osaka. And I acknowledge my North American bias here, but also players like Bianca Andreescu, despite the disappointment we just talked about, or Coco Gauff, but permeating out of the sport, breaking into the mainstream in a way that it's unclear if anyone ATP player definitely has the charisma and game to do that. It just seems like it would be a wise move to incorporate women into a hypothetical players union as quickly and enthusiastically as possible, even for your own welfare. and people paying attention to your tennis. So that I'm very excited about the future of the WTA. I am ultimately still excited about the future of the ATP, even if this final gave us every reason not to be. I think there are still a lot of fun names coming up that we've talked about, but it's just the names and the faces are just so much clearer. I mean, there's just no one on Naomi's level, really, no equivalent. So I hope that there is that even just on a basic marketing level, at least both parties, the men stand to gain a lot from a potential union or fusion of some kind. So let's see what happens.
From your voice to Vasik's head, apparently, because it sounds like they're working around the clock to rectify that situation. Yeah. But boy, does that make sense to me. You said I think you hit this, Giri, but like I'm not gonna indict the rest of the ATP for what we just watched and say it was complete trash, but it's a lot to think about if you're Andrea Gaudenzi or the crew running the ATP, and you have a lot of concerns for sure. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, fellas, that's it for the US Open. Somehow it's over. Somehow we have a new men's champion for the first time in 600 years, and Naomi Osaka reaching the pinnacle again. It's a lot to ask up to sum this all up into a few words, but anything we missed, guys? Simon, start with you. Anything you want to touch on before we go?
I'm just pleased that both storylines were positive in both sides of things. The ATP having a new Grand Slam champion is really nice. We've been waiting a long time for it, and I think someone who deserves to win their first Grand Slam, so close yet so far, did it the hard way, the very, very hard way. And I think on the women's side, it's Naomi Osaka's tour. She is clearly, if not the most talented, but within the top 3 most talented women on the tour, deserves her place and stands in a way that a lot of players could learn from in terms of using the voice that she has and making the sport feel a little uncomfortable. And as I've said numerous times on this podcast, when people are uncomfortable in positions of power, that's usually a good thing. So proud of the things that she's done over the last couple of weeks, and actually proud of Dominic Thiem for making that transition from clay to the hard courts.
Yeah, I would also like to give Thiem a shout out. I think there have been a few specific turning points in my mind that kind of turned me from a hater to a believer. The Nadal 2018 quarterfinal at the Open being the first one, and then I think the ATP Finals match against Djokovic being another. So, and then of course the Australian Open final, which was somehow this year, somehow. So watching that kind of iterative progression, I really think he deserved it, and it was amazing to watch. If not for the last 2 hours or so, but everything else was great.
Shouts to Dominic Thiem. Never forget Novak defaulted from this tournament, because I feel like that needs to be said again and again in terms of what the hell happened here. It feels like 10 years ago, but that happened. And perhaps the most intriguing thing for me that doesn't involve what we just saw was how Novak responds to that in Europe. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about that soon. Giri, doors always open, friend. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And Simon, we'll find ourselves back here next week. You can find us on Twitter at OpenEraPod, on patreon.com/OpenEra. And if you could leave a rating or a review wherever you find your podcast, that would be fantastic. Major thanks to producer extraordinaire Nick, working the ones and twos late into the night as we record right after the final. That's it for this week. This is Open Era. We'll talk to you soon.